Okay. And can I get a motion to approve the purchasing agenda?
Motion to approve the purchasing
To
agenda?
the full board, I'm sorry, for consideration.
Support.
All in favor say yay. Yay.
Aye.
And any opposed say same sign. And the motion will pass. And the purchasing agenda will be moved forward to the full board.
Great, thank you. The next action item, resolutions for Amendment 1 to the budget. And again, as you've seen before, 3 of our funds require amendment under state law, general operating fund being the first, special revenue fund, and debt retirement fund. I'm going to spend a little time, and most of my time actually, on the general fund. Cindy, can you log me back in here for a minute, please? And I'm going to project this up on the screens for you. It's easier to see. And we'll talk through some of the adjustments for Amendment 1, as I've been promising you the last couple of meetings. Typically, we bring a second amendment at one of the May Finance Committee meeting to get us, I can get the rest from there, thanks. Yeah. So. All right. If you look at where we get these numbered here, I guess beginning on page 6 of your handout is the revenue section of the general fund budget. As you can see, the first column is the original budget that the board approved. You approved back in June, and then this middle column there, 1920 Amendment 1, that's the adjustments to the various line items, and then the amended budget after that is, Amendment 1 is ultimately accepted, is that third column there. And the first page there on page 7 is and I'll go over some of the detail here in just a minute, but that gives you an overall perspective as to, on the revenue side, we had additional revenue pickup on Amendment 1 of the bottom there, almost $9.5 million. And
That's due to higher count.
well, just a couple of, this also understand that this general fund budget includes not only general fund Board of Ed dollars, but also the grant dollars that come through there also. So there's a chunk of that's is grant dollars too. We had some adjustments. Keep in mind that when the budget came to you back in June, the state had still not settled on the state budget. So many of the adjustments relate to that, the fact that the state finally passed their budget or settled their budget back in, I think it was early September actually. And so we adjusted for what we now know the state budget is, as well as enrollment. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So the next page then, on page 8, or page 7, sorry, is the expenditure side. Again, we added about almost $12 million, that middle column there on the expenditure side. And there's a summary of what went on, the various line categories there. I think the real information of interest to you is some of the specific adjustments. So look at the next page, page 8, and I've got that again up here. Let's first take a look at, we have the fund balance impacts. We started out with a fund balance of $12.2 million. The original adoption used about $1.5 million of that fund balance. And then this Amendment 1 on the general fund used another almost $2.5 million to a projected fund balance of almost $8.3 million. And I believe you have in front of you a spreadsheet with some shaded columns. Let me just talk about that for just a minute. You've seen this fund balance spreadsheet in past meetings. Focus on the last 3 shaded columns there. 2019 audited final, so that's after the 18-19 audit that I brought to the board in October. We ended up with a fund balance of almost $12.3 million. And that was 8.5% approximately of general fund budget, computed under both the board policy and the early warning requirements. The 1920 proposed budget that was adopted back in June got us down to about 7.25%. Now, that was after we had adjusted for, we had a fund balance pickup when the 18-19 audit was finalized. And so the initial budget that was adopted back in June, we had a fund balance of 5.21% to start with. But with that pickup at the end of the audit, it got us up to 7.25%, okay? And then if Amendment 1 is adopted, that'll get us back down to 5.47. So we're almost where we're at where we started the original budget year back in June, down to almost 8.3 million.
And this is what has to be at least 5%?
Correct, yeah. The board policy is 5%. Early warning requirement is a minimum 5%. Get below that, then there's some specific other steps we have to take with the state. So, but if you look below that fund balance on page 8 there, you can see some of the areas where we had some adjustments on Amendment 1. The first column is the general operations column. That column alone has an impact on fund balance. Second column there, grants. That has a zero impact on fund balance. Whatever additional revenue we pick up or lose, we make the same adjustment on the expenditure side, so the impact on fund balance is zero. Grants, we only can spend what we get, no more, no less. Well, there are some carryover options in some cases. So let me just talk about some of on the local sources side, made some adjustments to investment income based on our revised estimated investable balances. The property tax revenue, again, when the budget is adopted in June, the final new countywide assessments have not been finalized yet. And property taxes, as you know, is assessed on the assessed value of all property. So once that is done, now we have a better idea what we're actually going to get. So we figure we're going to pick up extra $350,000 from local tax collections.
Does this speak to the fact then that the value of houses are going up in the city? Okay.
Yeah. Value of real property. To remember now, this year, countywide was 4.8%. Actually, the city of Grand Rapids went up greater than the whole county as a whole. So again, part of that's minimized by the Headley rollback, if you will. These two decreases in transportation revenue and Act 18 revenue, again, those are millages assessed at the county level, again, on real property, and then it's sent back to the various local districts. We just revised our estimates for those to decrease about $280,000 in
So could you explain
revenue
that
there.
one again? I'm sorry. Could you
Yeah,
explain
okay,
that?
well, transportation, we get from the county essentially a revenue for special education transportation, all right? And it's actually based on actual costs of transportation.
Okay.
So once those final computations are done, we figure we may, based on reduce our budget by $180,000. We're not going to get as much money as we thought we were going to get.
It cost $180,000 more than we anticipated.
Actually less, so the reimbursement's less, if you will.
Okay.
The Act 18 is a countywide millage. That is, again, assessed on the real property values, and it's distributed proportionately to, right, Rhonda? Proportionally amongst the local districts based on our local assessments. So again, it's just an estimate that we're to reduce $100,000, okay, based on better information, if you will. The grant section, you'll see some adjustments again that we're making. Universal Service Fund, some of these things just weren't finalized when the budget was adopted back in June. Additional money in the way Connecting Children to Nature grant. some other grants. SAF, they have been going through really the last several months with the new director there, Sally, and Sally found out there was actually some additional dollars that had been sitting there for God knows how long that was for us, that she released, that we didn't know about, obviously, back in June.
So now, not we personally, but I mean, it's not the SAF that decides where the money goes. They give it to us and we decide?
In some cases.
Oh, in some cases
I mean,
they-
some cases it's, I mean, they SAF, they receive donations and grants, if you will, have a specific purpose to use.
Okay.
And so some of it is that too. Some of it's just their normal, we identify what we have a need. They give us some money. In other situations, outside donor gave money to SAF to be used for music program in Grand Rapids schools. So they pass it through to us, has to be used for music program, if
Okay.
you will. Okay? The state sources, you see the largest impact on revenue, increase of membership revenue. That's a combination of a couple of things. When you passed the budget back in June, we had used a increase in the foundation allowance at that time of $180 per student. It actually came out at $240. There was extra $60 per student. Plus, we ended up with a good fall enrollment, a good fall count date, I should say, about 200 more students than what we had used in the budget. Again, we were being conservative in the budget, so that's that's majority of that increase of $2 million related to those two factors. Special ed revenue, again, a decrease in that based on, that's based on special ed students, right? Yeah, students and costs, so again, reduction there. High school support, that was at $25 per high school student we were getting last year. That, when the budget was finalized, was eliminated. That was about $80,000 to us. Section 50, again, these are more, Section 51F, social education cost reimbursement, increased revenue there, we're estimating now. The 147A, 147C MIPSER's categorical revenue, most of that this is related to that MIPSER's dollars that come back to us from the state, and then we turn around and give the same amount right back to the state. So you'll see when we look at the adjustments to expenditures, part of that, or a portion of that increase in expenditures are related to this $1 million we're getting from the state. Got to turn right back around and give it to them. And then some other minor adjustments there. The itinerant, special ed itinerant revenue, we never really know. We don't know what that's going to be till the end of the year. We're just making some, adjusting our estimate based on actual people that are in the itinerant program, if you will. You'll see some of the adjustments on the grant side of things, a couple of big ones. That Eagle Recycling grant we brought to the board, I think, in November. That was a grant we'd applied for and actually got. But again, we didn't know about it back in June. Mental health grants, also those are those 3 mental health workers at our middle schools that, again, we had applied for, but didn't know until later. I think September we were made aware of that, so that's an adjustment there. Additional dollars in at-risk grants, dropout grant, Section 41, another section of the state. So those are all things that once the state budget was finalized in September, impacted some of these last few items here to the positive in terms of revenue. So additional almost $3.4 million state sources. For the general fund, $2.4 million on the grant fund. And then federal sources, a little decrease in we don't get a whole lot of federal dollars that go into the general fund. Most of it's in the grant section, so a little decrease in ROTC revenue, the programs that we have in the district. And then you can see some adjustments in the grant column for various other. The big 21st Century grant of almost $2.1 million. We thought back in June when the budget was prepared that we were only going to have 1 cohort would be funded. We actually got 4 that were funded, which is a good thing. So that's why that increased over $2 million. And again, this column to remind you, all the revenue we get, we turn around and spend it, so it has zero impact on fund balance.
And where are these 21st century people working? At different schools?
After-school programs?
After school?
After-school
All the other-
programs, yeah.
So
Okay.
if there's a school, after-school program, it's only there if 21st Century Grant funding
Okay,
comes in.
good.
Yeah,
So some
exactly.
years it gets cut, and so that
Yeah.
after-school program goes away.
Okay.
Let me stop here a second. And any questions on the revenue side of the adjustments? Okay. If you look down at the expenditures, continuing on here, as is always the case, 75% of our expenditures are in people costs. And the first adjustment there on line AQ, salary and benefit adjustments of about $2.8 million. As we, every year when the budget's adopted, we initially base it on fully staffed. We make an exception. We know that every year some positions we're not going to fill that are open. Some positions that are open will get filled at some point during the year, so there's always some adjustment. So we just really, this adjustment here firms up after the first 6 months what we think the ultimate staffing costs are going to be. There's also a benefit adjustment in there, and you'll see the same, this is for the instruction side. If you look down on line AX, you'll see a similar adjustment for support services. So that also includes any changes firming up our benefit costs. That's at 147A revenue I talked about earlier. The impact of some of that is in there also. Line AR, the software-related costs for the new ELA curriculum. That was approved, the purchase of the new language arts was approved by the board back in May, but we had not yet. We're still negotiating with Pearson as a provider in terms of what that was going to cost us. Those negotiations ended up after we approved the budget, so the $263,000 was not in the original budget. It is now. Increase in instructional services and substitutes. That HR again estimates what they think they're going to spend on that. That's just a revision. After 6 months of activity, we think we're going to spend more. Look at line AT, increase in center program tuition. All districts are participating in the center programs, and you may remember this from when we ran the center programs. The additional cost over revenue of running that program then gets sent out, gets distributed to the individual districts based on the number of students we have in those programs. Well, going to the ISD in 1920, it's going to cost all districts more. One, their compensation structure is greater than ours was. They've also added positions there, and so the impact on that is we estimate it's going to cost us $840,000 more than it did last year when we were running the programs. And again, that cost, it's additional cost to all districts, not just us. We obviously have the biggest impacts. We have the most students in those programs. On the grant side, you can see the online AU, $1.6 million in expenditures. That's again the additional cost for the additional revenue we got on the various grant programs we saw on the revenue side. And then support services, I talked about AX, professional learning costs related to curriculum implementation. That $309,000 is primarily two pieces. One is the new ELA I just mentioned, where we hadn't finalized that yet when the budget was adopted. There's some additional professional learning related to the Go Math, which was adopted in 18-19 year, and we realized we need some additional PD to equip our teachers for that new curriculum also. Software implementation costs and purchase services. Some of that's related to the business office software we're still implementing. I don't know, I think I don't know if there's any more synergy. We had some challenges with synergy this past year too, which required some additional outside consulting, maybe some dollars related to that. Repair and maintenance costs in line BA from our good friend Ken and his department, just additional costs associated with that. The trash, line BB, trash removal. I don't recall if we've brought the finance committee and board up to date on that particular issue, but last year we had a audit of our food service program, which is all federally funded. Oh crap, I'm gonna need you to come. There we go. And I got it on my screen, but I lost it up here.
There it is.
Okay, oh, there we go, it's back. Because the federal program, the food service program, we're allowed to allocate indirect costs back to that program. Rhonda, our business office costs, if you will, HR hires people for there. And one of the things we allocated back to them was the cost of our district-wide trash services, because at each individual building, we know there's a chunk of that trash that's related to food service. Mm-hmm. And trash includes not only trash, but also recycling. Mm-hmm. And so some of the paper products, as an example, that we use in the food service at our cafeterias at various buildings, get recycled. And we've been doing that for years and years and years and years and years, and we've had audits prior to that, and for whatever reason this year, the auditors said, well, in order for you to take that $140,000, what support do you have? Well, we didn't have anything that really, we were allocating about 50% of our costs. Reality is it's probably more than that. They didn't like that. We said, okay, what do we need to do? Well, you at least need to be billed separately for that. I said, well, I'm sure we can get our vendor to bill us separately. Well, you need more than that. Like what? They said, well, how about a separate garbage waste disposal container just for food service costs? Two problems with that. One, most of our buildings don't have room. We already have a waste and a recycling. To add a third container, we just don't have room at the buildings. And secondly, it's very difficult to train people to put food service stuff just in a food service garbage container, other garbage in the other garbage container. So there we
Sort of bookkeeping
yeah,
problem.
well, it's yeah, just no question about it. And we said that isn't a solution that's practical. We said, how about a sample of the vendor could take a sample of our buildings and do they call I think it's a waste study, where they take it back to their warehouse, dump it out, and try to determine how much is food service related garbage. Sounds terrible, doesn't it?
I know.
How much is not?
Where do you learn to major in that?
Yeah.
You have to have.
Anyway, so we were negotiating with the state, if you will, on various solutions to that, and we have at this point been unable to come up with their, I will say, being unreasonable about this whole issue. They pretty much want us to be able to specifically identify how much of that, or to take any allocation. So at this point, we're not going to take any allocations, and so that $140,000 that had been over in the food service line being reimbursed with federal dollars now has to be paid for with our general fund dollars, unless we are able to work something out between now and end of the year. Maybe we are, maybe we're not, I don't know, but at this point, it doesn't look promising.
So they decided not to take the garbage back and separate it all out?
That's exactly right, yeah.
Thanks for this level of detail.
Yeah.
We really needed to know that to do a job.
Well,
I wanted
anyways.
to know, I wanted to know.
Yeah, if I didn't, yes. Miss Downs would ask, or Miss Lewis would have asked about it anyways, so. So that's that whole thing. Then the line BC is, again, additional support dollars associated with the increased revenue on the grant side. And the other category there is just some minor adjustments. So That's where we get in total to about 5.6 million additional expenditures on the general operations side.
Quick question, Larry.
Yeah.
In relationship to the two salary and benefit adjustments, essentially what that means is that we're employing more people than we expected to employ. Is that, or it's not just because they're not just getting paid more, there's more people that we're hiring.
Part of it's compensation increases. Part of it is, we've got more people in our estimates in terms of costs related to how many people we'd have employed throughout the year are changing too. As I said earlier, we always have an allocation or a adjustment based on we can't hire everybody at one time. And again, based on the 6 months, what we've done in the past 6 months, we think it's going to cost us more, And part of it's, exactly.
So, one logic, we have more students, therefore we need more staff to teach those students rather than giving that current staff more.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, okay. Other questions on Amendment 1?
Any other discussion? Can I get a motion to move the Budget Amendment 1 General Fund Resolution to the full board for consideration?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor say yea.
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, same sign? And the motion passes, and the Amendment 1 for the general fund will be moved to the full board for consideration.
Dr. Baker, I hazard to say that I'm probably going to hear about how long I took for that at a subsequent.
Well, no, it's like details is important as long as everybody stays awake.
Well, we'll be real quick. Special Revenue Fund, the only adjustments we have there, and again, the two major areas, the two major funds in the Special Revenue Fund had been center programs, which we now do not have, and the food service. The adjustments for Amendment 1 related to closing out the centers program, that's it. You can see that on page 15. We close it out, no impact on fund balance. That's now center programs is out of our hands and fully in the hands of the ISD. And then the final fund there, debt retirement account, we just adjust again for, if you look on page 18 of your handout, you'll see the middle column there, Amendment 1, we adjust property taxes again based on the assessments. We determine we're going to collect about $135,000 more in property taxes, and our investment income, the invested funds, are going to be less. And at one time during the year, we thought rates were going to go up again. They actually went down. They're going to stay down, so we've reduced the investment income. And those are always the typical adjustments we make to the debt retirement fund. So
Amendment 1 special revenue fund?
that's all I want to say on that, unless there's any
this one.
questions on those two
This one?
particular funds.
Oh, he rolled them all together?
Do you need a separate amendment?
Yeah, we do, for each of those.
Any further discussion? Okay. Can I get a motion to move the Amendment 1 Special Revenue Fund resolution to the full board for consideration?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor say yea.
Yes.
Any opposed, same sign? And the motion will pass for the Amendment 1 to the Special Revenue Fund resolution will move to the full board. And any discussion with regards to the Debt Retirement Fund resolution, Amendment 1? Okay, can I get a motion to move the Amendment 1 to the Debt Retirement Fund resolution to the full board for consideration?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign? All right, that motion will pass as well, and it will be moved to the full board.
Great, thank you. Jump down to report section. December financial statements are included in your packet, including, although I don't see it in my packet here. Oh, there it is. Page 20 is the dashboard report. Again, we just talked about the adjustment, the amendments, and so that dashboard report is for your review, but it'll be, will be updated for the next month with the new with the new budget amount, so that's all I'm going to say about that.
So this is what we've spent so far this year.
Yeah, yeah, that's,
through
yeah.
December.
Yeah, and again, the amendments, you look at the year-to-date 2020, you know, and this is a different form. I apologize, Ms. Downs and Dr. Baker, you're new, but this is a new format we put in place last year, and just to go over that for future months, you can see at the very top there, I show we're 6 months into our fiscal year, so about halfway through. And if you look at the second column, percentage of 2020 annual budget, so we're halfway through the year, and you can see on the revenue side, we received about 45% of our budget revenue. Again, that'll be adjusted next month for the new revenue adjustments. On the expenditure side, near the bottom there, you'll see we're about 40.3% of the budget we spent through 6 months on the expenditure side. And then the fund balance change of year-to-date is about $7.4 million increase in fund balance. Down below there, I just have some key balance sheet information. The cash and investments in the general fund this year and last year comparison. The bonded debt, and the reason that went up as compared to December a year ago, as you may recall, is we issued another $87 million in bonds in April of 2019. And then you see the general fund, general fund balance there this year and last year, and the percent of unrestricted net revenues. And then the fund balance projected, again, that's prior to Amendment 1, so that'll be adjusted for next month's report. And then capital expenditures, that last section there. The capital expenditures, the first line is primarily the warm, safe, and dry, if you will, which we don't spend a lot. There's not much money left there anymore. That assessment went away in 2016. And then the last two lines there, bond-related capital expenditures, that middle line, if you will, is for the year, about $14.3 million for the, and then the bond-related capital expenditures grand total, that's since the bond program started, about $87 million. We did in December, as you can see, went through our first tranche of bonds. Those have all been spent now, and we're into our new tranche that were issued back in April.
I do have one question here. It's
Yes.
enrollment, and the total is 15,013. I thought we were higher than that.
We were, because this number last year included special ed. Center
Gotcha.
programs, we pulled it out both years to be
Okay.
comparative. So
Okay.
again, that's just a head count based on the last day of the month. And in
Okay.
December, that was December 20th, I think. Because,
Okay, so that's not our official
no,
enrollment.
that just gives you some. It's not official. It just gives you some idea where we stand on
Okay.
the enrollment, if you will. So, all right. Any other questions on and then behind that dashboard report is just the detail financial statements. If you like the detail, you can get into that. I usually don't spend any time talking about that. And then trying to be respectful. Ken, I don't know if you have any comments on the bond construction update.
Just a general update. The Southwest Middle High is moving along on schedule. We expect to be able to get in the building about July 1st. Ottawa, we have had some changes there. We're now using the refurbished gym. We've had games in it, gym and locker room. We accessed the new kitchen starting a week ago tomorrow. Last Tuesday, we started using the new kitchen, and we're in somewhat temporary quarters for the cafeteria in the old mall. We're using old furniture there, but that's where the cafeteria will function. And we've moved into the south house and vacated the north house. We are working with the construction manager. We've made some concessions with this phase that affect early middle college to get them in temporary quarters, trying to get back on a end of July completion date, and we think we're there on that project. Ottawa's been our most complex project.
Now, what about the swimming pool? Has that
We weren't touching the swimming pool.
So those problems that they had last fall were just ordinary problems that had to be fixed.
They had to be fixed, and nothing's ordinary, but yes, they were. And to be honest, if you go back to the start of the bond, when we had $375 million worth of need and only passed $175 million, we knew there were a number of things that weren't going to be addressed. So we've done our best to try and hit the most critical items, especially in the high schools, the classrooms. So when we're done and what's opened up in the South House, the classroom refurbishing is on par with what we did at City, with light ceilings, floors, wall paint, and technology. That's the focus. We wanted to work classrooms out. The difference at Ottawa and Union are we included refurbishing of the gyms as our two performance gymnasiums.
Now, all of the refurbishing that we did at the museum, at the 54 Jeff, that was covered by the XQ?
Between the two museum sites, we had allocated $2 million of bond money. The rest is to be covered by the XQ funds, yes. And then we did finish up a number of security projects over the holidays, and then there's some tweaking to do with when you get into the card swipes and what EPS puts in to make sure everything's functioning right. And but those essentially are done, and we're working with Mr. Johnson to identify the next group that we'll bring probably in March for you to approve bids. And then Union is the other major project, and that is proceeding, but that's a fairly long timeline before that one gets done.
Just want to clarify, Ms. Lewis, on the museum schools. $2 million of bond and then $5.5 million of the XQ grant for capital. The rest was the fundraising,
No.
private dollars.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah. Other questions for Mr. Clon-Parents? Okay. Then I quickly just want to touch briefly, item 2 there, the policy, in the back of your packet is there was a revenue consensus meeting on the 10th of January. The state does this twice a year, once in January and then once in usually mid-May. The consensus meeting in May generally forms the basis of what the state budget's going to look like. But so just briefly, if you look on page, it's number page 40 of your handout, which is the little summary of the forecast. And what the state does is they look at what they forecasted the prior meeting. So in this case, would have been May of 2019. They have the updated forecast in January, and as you can see there, the first section on page 40. If you look at both the general fund, which is the first measurements there, the middle is the SAF, which is school aid fund. You can see in both cases the estimates have increased from what they estimated things would be back in May, which is a good thing. They also do an estimate for next year, fiscal year 2021. You can see in both cases they're expecting increases of 1.7% to general fund revenue. School aid fund, which, again, a good thing, at 2.8%, and then they also go out to 2022, and they're also estimating increases in both the general fund and the school aid fund in 2022 of in excess of 2%. So those are all positive at this point, but we'll see what happens in May. And there's some other information in there, as you can see also. If you look down at the very bottom, you'll see on the lower right hand, a school aid index. And that is actually in the legislation to be used as one of the guiding tools for setting the increase in the foundation allowance. That calculation, if you look at fiscal year 2021, would indicate that the foundation allowance should be increased about 2.6%. I will tell you, realistically, at least since I've been around, that school aid index, the indicated increase in the school aid fund, the legislature never increases it by that amount. It's usually less than that. And then the last page, the one's kind of grayed out, if you will, it's the best copy I get, I apologize, is the estimate statewide pupil count for the current year 1920, and then also 2021 and 21-22. And as you can see, in all 3 years, we continue to see statewide decreases in K through 12 education. They're projecting almost 10,000 fewer students in this year, 7,300 next year, and 6,600 the year after. So the rate of decrease looks to be decreasing over the next couple of years, but it's still down. I think the high we hit was, I want to say 2005. We've been decreasing ever since, and as I think we've mentioned before, that's is also true within Kent County as a whole too. So that's all I have.
Anything else?
Good job, you get to use the gavel.
Well, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.